Hello, welcome to lesson 3. I'm glad that you have not given up yet, but have decided to continue persevering. Some Greek teachers comment that at this stage of learning Greek, students often will go through something called the fog. And maybe you know what I'm talking about. Things are very hazy. I've just downloaded a whole lot of information into your mind in the first 2 lessons, and things aren't making sense to you yet. And if that's how you feel, I encourage you to just keep going, keep pressing on, and I assure you that in time you will see the light at the end of the tunnel. So what are we covering in today's lesson? Here's an overview. We're looking at present active indicative verbs. We're also going to be learning about second declension nouns. We'll talk about prepositions. I will then introduce you to your new vocabulary for this week. And then we're going to finish with word operations and begin with your first translation work examples, which I'm really excited about. So if you're ready, I am. Let's get going. In the previous lesson, we looked at what a verb is. A verb is an action or a doing word. And I'd like to start this lesson by building on our knowledge of English verbs. So it says there, English verbs are generally arranged in predictable patterns consisting of stems, which are the root form of a verb, and various suffixes, which are words that are added to the end of the stem. So take a look at these 3 examples, and in all of these examples we are using the stem walk. So let's see how that word changes using the various time frames. So in the present tense, I could say, I am walking to the mall. So there we have our stem, walk, and then we add the suffix ing to the end of the stem to show that the action is happening in the present time. Then in the past time, I could say that yesterday I walked to the mall. So there we have our stem again, walk, and then we add the suffix ed to the end of the stem to show that the action took place in the past. And then in the future time, I could say tomorrow I will walk to the mall. So there we have our stem walk. And even though there is no suffix added to the end of it, we use the helping word will, which shows us that the action happens in the future time. So generally, English verbs have predictable patterns. So in the first lesson, we learned that a verb is an action or doing word. And in this lesson, I want to look at 2 characteristics of English verbs. And the first one is that they are either finite or infinite. So what's the difference between them? Well, finite verbs have a person and a number. Therefore, they can be conjugated. So take a look at this example. It says, he painted the wall. So the verb painted is a finite verb because it has a person and a number, which is represented by the personal pronoun he. Infinite verbs, on the other hand, have no person and number, therefore they cannot be conjugated. And here are 3 examples: to jump, to swim, and to run. The second characteristic of verbs is that they can be intransitive or transitive. So let's take a look at the difference between the 2. Intransitive verbs require no direct object. So the example is, she slept. So the verb slept does not require a direct object to complete it. And so the sentence, she slept, is a complete idea and can stand alone. On the other hand, transitive verbs must take a direct object. So look at this example. Let's say that after this lady slept, she said to her husband, "Please bring coffee." So the verb bring is a transitive verb because it requires a direct object to complete it. And the direct object in this example is coffee. Let's now turn our attention to Greek verbs. So it says that Greek verbs, like nouns, are highly inflected. That is, they are able to change or be altered in many different ways. And just to remind you again of what inflection means, inflection refers to the spelling changes that words undergo to reflect their grammatical function in a sentence. I'd like to build on this idea of inflection now. So it says the inflection in Latin means I bend. So inflected words are bent or modified from the stem's simplest form. All right, so this is similar to the English verbs, where we looked at the example of walk, and depending on the tense, we add suffixes to it or not. But Greek verbs can be bent or modified in even more ways. So have a look there. It says, for instance, Greek verbs can add morphemes. Morphemes are the smallest units of meaning. So such as, we can also add prefixes. So prefixes are letters that we can add to the front of the stem. And in Greek, we get augments and reduplication. And we'll learn about this at a later stage. And then, like English, we can add suffixes. And these suffixes will communicate person and number to us. So we'll learn about this in a short while. And then it says the stem, which is the root form of the verb, can also be slightly altered or even completely transformed. All right, so all of these inflections, the prefixes, the suffixes, and the transformation of the stem contribute to the complexity of Greek verbs. Now that we have been introduced to the Greek inflectional verb system, let's remind ourselves of the characteristics of Greek verbs. They have voice, mood, person, number, and tense. So today we are going to learn the present active indicative verb endings. All right, so present tense form is related, if you remember, to the imperfective verbal aspect, where the action is viewed as ongoing or as in process. Then the active has to do with the voice, and specifically the active voice tells us that the subject is the one doing or performing the action of the verb. And then finally the indicative has to do with the mood, and the indicative mood is the mood of assertion. And the indicative mood is the only mood in Greek where time is significant. So we are looking at the present active indicative verb endings. We'll learn the endings and then we will do some examples together. Before we learn any endings, it is important that we understand how Greek verbs are built. So let's take a look at the three components of a Greek verb. We have the stem, the connecting vowel, and the personal ending. So firstly, the stem. The stem is that part of the verb that carries its basic meaning. So in this example, the stem is lu. Secondly, we have the connecting vowel. Now the connecting vowel is often used to aid with pronunciation. of a word. And that is because Greek will also add suffixes after the connecting vowel. Now, an important rule to be aware of is that in the indicative mood, if the personal ending begins with a mu or a nu, then the connecting vowel will be an omicron. And if the personal ending begins with anything else other than the nu or the mu, then the connecting vowel will be a epsilon. So just be aware of that rule. And then the personal ending in this example is men. And obviously personal endings will vary. But personal endings are very important because they indicate to us the person, which is the actor of the verb, as well as the number. How many actors is it? Is it singular or is it plural? All right, so the components of a Greek verb are the stem, the connecting vowel, and the personal ending. One of the advantages of learning Greek, which has personal endings, is that we can tell what the subject of the verb is, even if the subject is not stated. And the reason for that is that the subject is normally found or built within the personal ending. All right, so I just wanted to make you aware of that. Having said that, I want to introduce you now to the present active indicative personal endings. So let's take a look at them together. The first person singular, you see there has a dash, and that's because it actually doesn't have a personal ending. And I'll say more about this in the next slide. The second person singular is sigma. Third person singular is iota. First person plural is men. The second person plural is te. And the third person plural is nu sigma iota. So now that you have been introduced to these personal endings, let's see what they look like when they're attached to the stem of a verb with connecting vowels. What I'd like to explain to you now is how some of these personal endings, so I've indicated those personal endings with a PE. So let me underline those for you. Have undergone slight modification. Not all of them. You'll see that the second person singular, you can still see the sigma at the end. The third person singular, the iota at the end. The first person plural, you've still got your men at the end. Second person plural, you've got the te on the end. But the first person singular and the third person plural have undergone some modifications. So let me explain to you how that took place. An example that we are going to use is the stem lu. Remember that the stem gives us the basic meaning of the verb, and in this case lu means to loose, and in some contexts can mean destroy. So that is our stem. I've also included the connecting vowels, so let me underline those for you. Remember that in the indicative mood, the connecting vowel will either be the epsilon or the omicron, which is what you see in this case. Let me explain to you now some of the modifications that took place. Let's begin with the first person singular. You have lu r. The r is the connecting vowel. It's not a personal ending. And to compensate for not having a personal ending, it lengthened to an omega. So you don't have lu r, you now have the modified personal ending, which is lu o. Then the second person singular, scholars are divided as to what actually happened here, but I think the best way to understand it is that the sigma and the iota swap places. So now you have lu ace, and because the sigma is at the end of the verb, it takes a different form. The third person singular, simply put, in my own words, the sigma and the tau fell away, so you're left with lu a. And unlike the second person singular, the sigma wasn't added to the end of the verb. Then the first person plural and the second person plural have stayed the same. There's no modifications there. And then the third person plural, the new fell away, and to compensate for that loss, the omicron lengthened. So now we have the upsilon, which forms a diphthong, and we now have luusi. And we also have a movable nu at the end of the verb. And that means that if the following letter is a vowel, then the nu will remain there. But if the following letter is a consonant, then the nu will fall away. So I hope that is not very technical, but simply explains to you how we ended up with our modified personal endings. I realize that we have taken a periphrastic or roundabout way to get to this point, but I think that it was important for you to understand, first of all, what the actual present active endings are, as well as to see how they've undergone modification. So with that background knowledge now, I'm now going to present you with the modified present active endings using the example of luo, and these are the endings that you are going to have to learn. So let's go through them together. The first person singular is pronounced as luo. The second person singular, luais. Third person singular, luai. First person plural, luamen. Second person plural, luete. Third person plural, luusin. Let me say those one more time for you, starting with the singular, luo, luais, luai. Luamen, lueta, luusin. Let me quickly introduce you to two important terms that have to do with inflection. Remember that inflection refers to the spelling changes that words undergo to show their grammatical function in a sentence. So when we are speaking about the spelling changes with regard to verbs, we refer to that as conjugation. And when we are speaking about the spelling changes that Greek nouns undergo, we refer to that as declension. So let's practice conjugating a verb together. So it says there, conjugate present active indicative of luo. All right, so we are going to now practice showing how luo is modified for the different persons and numbers. So the first person singular is, of course, luo. The second person singular is luais. Third person singular is luai. The first person plural is luamen. Second person plural is luete. And third person plural is luusin. Right, so there is an example of conjugating the present active indicative using luo.
Present active indicative verbs, present active indicative verbs, present active indicative verbs, present active indicative verbs. O-ace, a. Present active singular. Amen ete usi. Present active plural. O-ace, a. Present active singular. Amen ete usi. Present active plural. O-ace, a. Present active singular. Amen ete usi. Present active plural. O-ace, a. Present active singular. Amen ete usi. Present active plural.
Now that I've introduced you to the verb endings, the next step is to understand how we translate the present active indicative verbs. So I'm going to shorthand this for us, present active indicative. So the active voice reminds us that the subject is the one performing the action. The indicative mood is the mood of assertion, whereby a statement is made. And it is also the only mood where the time of the action is relevant. And so in the indicative mood, the action is generally going to occur in the present time. And then the present tense relates to verbal aspect. And in this case, we are focusing on the imperfective aspect. So let's remind ourselves what verbal aspect is. It is the subjective perspective or viewpoint from which an author communicates the action of a verb. So let's consider this using our diagram. So the author's view or perspective of the action that is being described is one in which the action from their perspective is still ongoing. It is still in process. And therefore we need to translate it as such in the present active indicative. Let's take a closer look now at translating luo in the present active indicative, where we convey the imperfective verbal aspect, showing that the action is in process, it's ongoing, it's linear. So remember that the verb endings communicate two very important pieces of information, the person, which is first, second, or third, and then whether the actor is singular or plural. So let's have a look at this together. The first person singular, luo, is translated as I am loosing. Second person singular, luase, translated as you are loosing. Third person singular, lua, he, she, it is loosing. First person plural, luamen, we translate it as we are loosing. Second person plural, lueta, you are loosing. And then third person plural, luusin, translated as they are loosing. What's also good to understand is that the subject of the verb is built within the verb. So these endings here, o, ace, a, are communicating the subject. So the first person singular would be the I, second person singular, you, and third person singular is he, she, or it. And that goes for the plural as well, where the amen, the eta, and the usin are communicating the subject. The first person plural is we, second person plural you, and third person plural is they. All right, so therefore there's no need to convey the subject outside of the verb. So just remember that when you do your translation work. Before we carry on, I just want to stop and officially congratulate you on learning your first set of verb endings. So well done. What we're going to do now is learn your first set of noun endings. And to introduce the nouns, I want to speak to you about the Greek nominal system. So it says there, the Greek nominal system is the overarching term that includes the article, nouns, pronouns, adjectives, and numerals. And then I'd also like to introduce you to an important word that we'll be using quite frequently in this series. Maybe not in this lesson, but we will in due time. So it's good to be familiar with it. A substantive refers to any word that functions as a noun. Any word that functions as a noun. And then all substantives are classified according to patterns and declensions. Declension refers to the declining, falling, or inflection. All right, you've seen that word before, inflection, of the endings of a substantive. So you've seen that word now before. Any word that's functioning as a noun according to its different usages in a sentence. Alright, so declension refers to the declining, falling, or inflection of the endings of a substantive according to its different usages in a sentence. A substantive is said to be fully declined when all its inflectional forms are cited. Substantives are divided into 3 distinct declensions based on their stem endings. First, second, and third declensions. So let's take a look at those 3 declensions in more detail. Firstly, first declensions. What are the characteristics of these nouns? Well, firstly, there are about 47 New Testament first declension nouns. They have feminine genders, and their stem ends with alpha or eta. So here are 2 examples. The first with the alpha ending, we have doxa, and then with the eta ending, graphe. Now, second declension nouns. There are about 700 New Testament second declension nouns. They have masculine or neuter genders, and their stem ends with a omicron. So here's 2 examples, anthropa and cosma. And then the third declension nouns can be any gender, and their stems end with a consonant. So that's the biggest difference. And there's an example, basileus, basileus. So we are going to be focusing on second declension nouns beginning in this lesson and the following lesson, because as you can see, there are far more second declension nouns than the first or the third, and they are also easier to begin learning. Let's continue speaking about declensions. It says, each declension is further broken down into paradigms. Or what are paradigms? A paradigm is an orderly arrangement of all possible inflected forms of a word and serves as the model of all other words that fit the inflectional pattern. So I realize that this is just theory to you at the moment and might not make sense, but I assure you that it will become clearer in time as we do some examples together. But at this point, the relationship that declensions are divided into related paradigms may be like taking a deck of cards and separating the spades, hearts, clubs, and diamonds into 4 different stacks. Now, although each stack has the same number of face and numbered cards, they are distinct from each other because of their suit. These stacks represent the different declensions, although as we've learned, there's only 3 declensions. Each stack could also be subdivided again by separating and grouping the face and numbered cards of each suit. Now, in like manner, paradigms are subdivisions of a declension, being divided according to similar inflected endings. So here is a paradigm template for nouns. So based on the previous illustration that I gave you, you can think of this as being a stack of cards. But relating this to our declensions, this is specifically our second stack, looking at the second declension nouns, which have either a masculine or a neuter gender. And this paradigm template now is further subdividing and separating and grouping the various cards within that stack. And the way that we are going to group them is we are going to group them according to case, and we're always going to learn the cases in this order: nominative, genitive, dative, and accusative. And then we're going to have a look at the singular forms and the plural forms of each noun, beginning with the articles of the singular and then the articles of the plural. and that'll be accompanied by the various nouns as they relate to the cases. Now, just before we tackle the articles and the nouns together, I'd like to do what I did with the verbs, and that is to show you how the Greek noun is built. So let's have a look at the components of a Greek noun. You can see they're very similar to the verbs. They have a stem vowel, and a case ending. Remember that the verbs have personal endings and the nouns have case endings because the case determines its function in a sentence. So our first example there is anthrop. The stem vowel is omicron and the case ending is sigma. Alright, so all the second declension nouns will have the omicron stem vowel, and that is why they are second declension. Our second example is cosm. Stem vowel is omicron and the case ending is sigma, so we have cosmos. So now that you know how the Greek noun is built, let's have a look at the Greek article together. So in Greek, there is only a definite article. Remember, definite article is the, so there's no indefinite article as in English. The indefinite article again is a or an. So we generally have to supply that in the English. The second point is the article is the key to understanding the forms of nouns in Greek. So why are they the key? Well, the first reason is that it says there, the article always agrees with the noun that it modifies in three ways: in gender, number, and case. So in other words, the article never lies about the information of the noun. And the second reason is the nouns, the endings of nouns are similar to its corresponding article. So take a look at the example here. We have the article to in front of the noun anthropou. And if you look at the ending of the noun, it's the diphthong omicron upsilon, the u, which corresponds to the article, which also has a diphthong omicron upsilon. The only difference is that there is a tau in front of the article. And that brings us to the last point. The Greek article begins with a tau, as it does in this example, or a rough breathing mark. And the only exception is the neuter singular. Alright, so guys, I cannot overemphasize the importance of learning the Greek article. Why? Because it's the key to understanding the forms of nouns in Greek. The article never lies. It always agrees with the noun that it modifies in gender, number, and case. So let's begin with the second declension articles. And today we're only looking at the masculine gender, and the following lesson we'll look at the neuter gender together. And when we learn the articles and the nouns, we'll do them in this order: the nominative case, genitive case, dative case, and then the accusative case. So let's take a look at these articles together. The singular first, nominative, ha, genitive, tu, dative, to, accusative, ton. Let me say those again: ha, tu, to, and ton. And then our plural articles: nominative, hoi, genitive, tone, dative, tois, and accusative, tous. So from the top, hoi, tone, tois, and tous. At this point, I want to show you what the second declension noun endings are, because I agree with William Mounce, who says that just about every grammar teaches that the final stem vowel is part of the case ending. So for example, most grammars will show the nominative singular as omicron sigma. And William Mounce is making the point that not only is this incorrect, but in our opinion, it makes learning Greek much more difficult. So if you learn the true case endings, you will find that memorization is kept to a minimum. So taking that connecting vowel away, the actual ending is sigma. So let's go through these true endings together. The nominative singular is the sigma. The genitive singular is omicron upsilon. Dative singular is the omega with the iota subscript. The accusative singular is the nu. Nominative plural is omicron iota. Genitive plural, omega nu. Dative plural, omicron iota sigma. And then the accusative plural is upsilon sigma. Okay, so you're going to see that these endings are very similar to the articles, but let's take these endings now and attach them to a stem and see how they work. Welcome to the marriage between the article and the noun. It's what we've all been waiting for. So what I'll do is read these for you and then make some observations. So the nominative singular is ha anthropos, genitive tu anthropou, dative to anthropo, accusative ton anthropon. The plural nominative hoi anthropoi, genitive ton anthropon, dative tois anthropois, and the accusative tous anthropous. All right, so as I was reading those articles and nouns, I'm sure you recognize the similarities between them. So let me go ahead and color in the endings for you first. So as you can see, as we attach the endings to the stem, most of them are pretty much the same as the article, with the exception of the nominative singular. We have to add in the omicron, and the accusative singular, we add in the omicron, and then also the accusative plural, the omicron. All right, so it's all right to learn these endings with the vowels. I'm sure that's going to help you anyway. And then the articles have the additional tals. So if you learn the articles off by heart, it should make the declining of the second declension nouns a lot easier for you. And then just one more thing before we go, is that if you had to look for this word in a dictionary, you will see that its lexical form will always be given as the nominative singular form. So it'd be the anthropos with the article. Here is an example of the lexicon entry. It says that every substantive's or noun's lexical entry is in its nominative singular form, as I said to you. So if you have a look in the page of a lexicon, you will find it looks like this. You have the noun and the article. So anthropos ha. All right, and then you've got your u as well, which just tells you that that is the genitive form. But as long as you understand that you have the noun first and then the article. Now that you are familiar with the articles and the nouns in their various cases, let's now take a look at how we would translate each one. All right, so the nominative singular, ha anthropos, is translated as man. The genitive singular, tu anthropou, is translated of man, and we add in the of in English to indicate the possessive idea. The dative singular is to anthropo, and that's translated as to man. So we add in the to assist with helping us understand that it's functioning as the indirect object. And then the accusative singular is ton anthropon, and that's translated as man. All right, now, even though I haven't added the article in here, when you translate, you would generally take the article and translate it as the man. And if there was no article there, then you would translate it as a man. All right, so just be aware of that. Then the Nominative plural, hoi anthropoi, is obviously the plural of man, which is men. The genitive plural, ton anthropon, of men. The dative plural, tois anthropois, two men. And accusative plural, tous anthropous, translated as men. The next section of this lesson are prepositions. And once again, before we look at Greek prepositions, we need to know what an English preposition is. So a preposition is a word that indicates the relationship between two words. So in the examples here before us, we are going to look at the relationship between the ball and the box. And this describes a spatial relationship. So in our first example, we see that the ball is in the box. So I want to quickly make a point here that every preposition has an object. So in this case, the object is the box. The ball is in the box. Right, so in all our examples here, the box will function as the object of the preposition. A second example, the ball is on the box, then it's under the box, then it's next to the box. Fifth example, it's behind the box, in front of the box, and finally it's between two boxes. So now that we've reminded ourselves of what a preposition is, let's look at the characteristics of Greek prepositions. So as was the situation with the English prepositions, Greek prepositions also have an object, and that object can either be a noun or a pronoun. Now, here's the biggest difference with Greek prepositions. Each preposition in Greek requires its object to be in a certain case. So here's an example. Upper, which is a preposition, takes its object in the genitive case. Right, so that'll always be true. You will never have its object in a different case. It must be in the genitive case. That is a golden rule. So there's our example, upper to cosmu, and to cosmu is the object, and it is in the genitive case. And then finally, you must memorize the case in which each preposition requires its object. So here is an example of some of the prepositions that you will have to learn for basic Greek. So I've listed them in the first column there. And then I've also indicated which cases their objects are required to be in. So the first case there is the genitive. Then we have the dative. And then finally we have the accusative case. So let's look at these one by one. Upper, as we saw previously, requires its object to be in the genitive case. And I'm not going to go through all the meanings now, but just want to show you what cases their objects are in. Hooper is in the genitive or in the accusative. In, its object is in the dative case. Ace, its object needs to be in the accusative case. Ac or ax, its object is in the genitive case. And then finally pros, its object is in the accusative case. Right, so every time we learn our new vocabulary, I will indicate to you which case the object needs to be in. The final concept to be aware of when learning about prepositions are some of the changes that take place before words beginning with vowels. So when people speak, they often smooth over combinations of sounds that are difficult to pronounce. So for example, our English contractions. So in Greek, this phenomenon occurs with prepositions. So here's the first phenomenon. Number one, if a preposition ending in a vowel is followed by a word beginning with a vowel, the preposition usually drops its final vowel and replaces it with an apostrophe. So let's take a look at our examples here. Our first one is meta plus anthropou equals met anthropou. So what's happened there? All right, the preposition ends with a vowel and the noun begins with a vowel. All right, so this rule will apply, and the alpha drops out of the preposition and is replaced by the apostrophe. So we have met anthropou. The next example is hooper plus angelou equals hoop angelou. All right, so here we have preposition ending in a vowel and the noun beginning with a vowel, so the rule applies. The omicron of the preposition drops out and is replaced by the apostrophe. There is a second variation to be aware of, and let's go through that together. If, in addition, the word following the preposition begins with a rough breathing mark, the final tau or p of the preposition changes to a theta or a phi, respectively. So let's have a look at the two examples here. First one is meta plus huiu equals meth huiu. All right, so as you can see, the tau of the meta, all right, has now changed to the theta. And then in the second example, the p in upper, which is a preposition, has changed to the phi. All right, and that's because the noun has begun with a rough breathing mark. All right, so be aware of those two variations when prepositions are found before words that begin with vowels. I can't believe we're already introducing our new vocabulary for lesson 3, but let's go through the words together. I will underline the nouns, which in this case will be the second declension nouns in green. I will do the other words in different colors. So let's take a look at the first one. We have angelos ha, and that means angel or messenger. Next we have adelphos ha, and that means brother. Next we have a preposition that you've seen already. That's upper, and it means from, and in brackets we see that its object needs to be in the genitive case. All right, now we have a verb, blepo, and that means I see. Now we have gnosko, and that means I know. Then we have grapho, that means I write. Next we have didasko, that means I teach. Then we have another noun, cosmos ha, and that means world. Then we have luo, which you're familiar with from our verb endings, and that means I loose, and in some cases can mean I destroy. And finally we have uranos ha, and that means heaven. The next section of our lesson are word operations, which is really just a fancy way of speaking about Greek jargon. And the jargon that I want to make you familiar with is this word pass. So it says here, to pass a noun, pronoun, adjective, or verb, give the identifying details that specify the grammatical form of the word. So when you pass a verb, you need to give the following information and characteristics in this order. So you would give the tense, the voice, the mood, the person, the number, and the source of that verb. And then if you have to pass a noun, pronoun, or adjective, you would give the following information. You would identify the part of speech, and then give the case, the gender, the number, and then the lexical form. All right, so passing different verbs and nouns requires that you give this information. And at the end of this lesson, we'll actually practice doing some passing together using an actual passing sheet. Now we come to my favorite part of Greek, and that is translation work. And by favorite, I don't mean that it's easy. It's difficult. But you can think of approaching this like a detective who is having to solve a mystery or solve a puzzle. Now, to help you with translating the Greek text, which in this case is graphusi logos theou, I've given you something called a passing sheet. And I will make this available to you as a download from our website. But here is a passing sheet. And I want to demonstrate to you how to use a passing sheet. And not just demonstrate to you, but really encourage you to get into the habit of using it regularly, using it every single time you have to do some translation work. So what we do is we have a column here for the word. So we take every word that we don't know, and in this case I'd like you to pass every single word. So we write them down here, graphusi, logos, and theou. Write them in that column. Then we have the passing information which we're going to give. If it's a verb, we do the tense, voice, mood, person, and number. And if it is anything besides a verb, we give the part of speech, the case, the gender, and also the number. And then in our final column, we give the lexical form. So that is the nominative singular form of that word. And that's why it's important to know your vocab. So let's go through this very quickly. For graphusi, I've passed it for you. It is a verb. Its tense is present. Its voice is active. Its mood is indicative. Its person is third person. And the number is plural. The lexical form is grapho. So based on that information, how would we translate graphusi? Well, remember from our verb endings, the usi tells us that the subject is they. So we would begin with the subject, they. And what are they doing? What is the meaning of grapho? It's I write. And we want to convey the imperfective verbal aspect, the linear idea. So it's they are writing. And what are they writing? Let's go to our next word. Logos. It is a noun. All right. The case is accusative. The gender is masculine and it's plural. The lexical form is logos. That's from our previous vocabulary. And because it is plural, we have to translate it as not word, but words. So they are writing words. And then we have the next word, theou, which is a noun. The case is genitive, gender masculine, and it's singular. And the lexical form is theos. So because this is the genitive, and that indicates possession, we would translate this as of God. Right? So we add in the English words there to show possession, God. So there we have our translation. They are writing words of God. Let's do one more example together. Let's take a look at our second translation example. I'll begin by reading the Greek text and then we'll look at the passing information together. So we have ha, anthropos, theu, akue, tone, logon, anthropone. So we begin by placing all the words in the column and passing each word. So for the sake of time, I have done that for you. So we begin, we have ha, which is an article, and that is nominative, masculine, singular. The lexical form is ha. Then we have anthropos. That is a noun. Now, remember the rule. The article will always agree with the noun that it's modifying in gender, number, and case. So is that true? Well, I've given you the information for the article, so we know that the noun would have the same information. So it'll also be nominative, masculine, singular. Lexical form is anthropos. So that means the man. Then we have theu. It's a noun. It's in the genitive case, masculine, singular. Lexical form theos. That means God. In the English, we want to convey the possessive idea, so we add the words of. So we have the man of God. And then we have a verb, akue. It's in the present, active, indicative, third person singular. The lexical form is akuo, which means I hear. Then we have another article, which is tone, and it's a genitive, masculine, plural. The lexical form is the ha, that's the nominative singular form, remember. Then we have logon. So the article is modifying the noun logon, therefore it'll have the same information. Genitive, masculine, plural. Lexical form is logos. And then finally, anthropone, nominative, it's a noun. It's genitive, masculine, plural from anthropos. So now, how would we translate this verse using this information that we have passed? Well, it begins with the article the man of God, and then we have akue, and we want to translate that with the imperfective verbal aspect, which conveys the progressive or ongoing idea of the action. So akuo means I hear. So the man of God is hearing. What is he hearing? He's hearing the words of men. So the man of God is hearing the words of men. If I've gone through that too quickly, please go through that slide again to make sure you understand how we ended up with that translation. Once you feel more confident, I encourage you to take the quiz and to do the translation exercise that I've given you there.